Hello and welcome to Module 9. In this module, we are going to discuss two different readings. The first is a reading by a philosopher named Immanuel Kant, and the second reading is by a philosopher named Hegel. So this video is going to be a very brief introduction to these two readings. Now, I think that it's very interesting that Dr. King actually included these readings in his syllabus. Specifically, I think that it's interesting that he included Immanuel Kant. And that's because Kant is not really widely recognized for doing political philosophy. He is recognized for doing moral philosophy, but it's not immediately obvious what exactly his contribution to political philosophy is. So I want you to think about that in some detail. And with regard to Hegel, Hegel is recognized for what is called a philosophy of right. And we'll have a chance to reflect on what that means in more detail as you progress through this module. However, all of that said, I think there are some inferences we can make regarding why Dr. King included these readings in his syllabus. On the one hand, both philosophers, Kant and Hegel, kind of focus on rationality and autonomy and having a certain kind of freedom, which is really important for both of their philosophical projects. And on the other hand, both philosophers take a sort of a progressive approach, where human nature is marching towards a better world. And for both philosophers, this sort of progress really kind of is centered on their understanding of rationality, having a capacity for reason, and as well as their understanding of autonomy and human freedom. So let's begin by thinking about Immanuel Kant. So Kant is widely recognized for revolutionizing philosophy, especially on the European continent. His major contribution to philosophy comes in a very long and very difficult to read book titled The Critique of Pure Reason. In this text, The Critique of Pure Reason, Kant has given us a certain kind of epistemology or study of knowledge, as well as a certain understanding of the human mind, of thought and reason. And more specifically, Kant is offering a kind of a limited account of what it is that we can know, how we know certain things, right? So he's interested in the question of what is it that we can actually know? And the answer that he provides to this question is a kind of limitation on what it is that we can know. He also wrote another very long and complicated text known as The Critique of Practical Reason. And there he is still interested in reason, but it's centered more on morality, how we should behave, what is the ethically right thing to do, how should I behave in particular situations. And for Kant, the answer to these sorts of questions is going to really be, again, focused on reason and rationality, right? So for Kant, the morally right thing to do is tied to what the moral law says. For Kant, that's the categorical imperative. And we can think about this in terms of sort of submitting ourselves to the rational moral law. He also wrote a text that's called The Metaphysics of Morals, where he further elaborates on this general idea that ethics and morality is founded on, kind of grounded in reason and rationality. While much of Kant's work focuses on questions dealing with epistemology, questions about knowledge, as well as questions about morality, how should we behave, he has it's very interesting and less well-known texts. One is a text called What is Enlightenment, which is the text that you're reading for this class. And there he's focusing on very central questions to the Enlightenment, questions that deal with thinking for oneself. Again, Kant's philosophical project really centers around the Enlightenment ideals of thinking for oneself. And for Kant, this is a kind of submitting oneself to certain laws of reason and rationality. And in doing so, we can progress to a better society, a better world, you might say, which is, again, in line with certain Enlightenment ideals, this idea of progression, of sort of humanity's march towards a better, more enlightened world. And he also wrote a text called Perpetual Peace, where these same sort of things come up. And we can also think of this part of Kant's work in terms of a kind of legal philosophy, where he's offering a philosophy of right, sort of what would be the best form of government for any particular city or society that would allow us to progress towards a better world, allow us to to really encompass these Enlightenment ideals, which are central both for Kant's epistemological projects as well as his ethical project. Now, when it comes to Hegel, Hegel has a similar sort of approach. He offers us a kind of a philosophy of right, or you might think of that in terms of a kind of a legal philosophy, where he's attempting to cash out what would be the best kind of government or the best sort of society. And like Kant, he is also focused on autonomy and human freedom, which is again this sort of submitting oneself to the law of reason, to law of rationality. So these features of Hegel's philosophy are similar to Kant's. You can see how this is in line with someone like Rousseau, who we discussed previously, and Rousseau's understanding of Romanticism, where Rousseau focuses on autonomy and human freedom as it relates to one's personal identity, who we are at the most fundamental level. But unlike Rousseau, who thought that the sort of the march towards a better world was actually corrupting society, Kant and Hegel thought that we were progressing towards a better world insofar as we are designing a society that could allow us to flourish and to progress in such a way. So Kant saw this as an ideal, something that we could actually work towards. And for Hegel, this is also tied to his understanding of history. For Hegel, history is continuously marching towards some final moment in history where reason and rationality is brought together and joined with human freedom, and these sort of features of human nature are able to flourish. Of course, there are some important differences between Kant's approach and Hegel's approach. And I want you to reflect on what those differences might be. And I want you to think about and reflect on how they are similar and how they are different as you watch some of the other videos in this module. And at the end of this module, you're going to watch Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous speech, the I Have a Dream speech, where Dr. King is envisioning a future world where, human nature flourishes. And I want you to think about and reflect on some of the basic sort of fundamental features and characteristics of Dr. King's approach in this speech as it relates to Kant and Hegel's sort of philosophy of right, and designing the right sort of government where humans are able to flourish by using their reason and their autonomous human freedom. So then that concludes our basic introduction to the readings for this module. Go ahead and watch the other videos, concluding with Dr. King's speech, I Have a Dream.